That's going to be something that slows down the acceptance of VoIP as a technology. VoIP makes phone calls frictionless, meaning very low cost, and just like email is frictionless, costing far, far less than postal mail, it's going to attract spam. So all I'm going to be able to do is just make sure that when you get the spam, it's going to be encrypted spam. No one will be able to wiretap the spam phone calls that you get.
Okay. I have a question. If we have two Asterisk installations which have non-encrypted phones on each side, and I just say for the example that I think that my local internet is secure, so I don't have to have a secure connection to my Asterisk, but I want to have a secure connection from my Asterisk to the other Asterisk. Can I use that phone for that?
Yeah, you can. If your outgoing call is through your PBX, which I guess it would be, your call is physically going through the PBX because you're running an Ethernet cable from your phone to the PBX. It will encrypt it as it goes to the other PBX. But it's not doing it through the EEX protocol. It's doing it through the SIP RTP connection. You would have to be this protocol only works with RTP. It doesn't work with AIX.
Do you have a handle for that anywhere?
If you go up to the zFone project website, there's on the products there's something where it says Asterisk support, ZRTP for Asterisk. Download or take a look at the online documentation for that, and it tells you something about that.
Thanks.
And also take a look at the FAQ page. We have this huge FAQ, comprehensive FAQ page where there's lots and lots of links to Wikipedia articles. So one of the criticisms I've heard from people is that the FAQ page is mostly for people in the VoIP industry. That people from outside the VoIP industry don't understand what all these acronyms mean. But I've got links to Wikipedia articles for all the acronyms. In fact, not just acronyms, but concepts. So take a look at that. I'd like to say something about the social implications of this. The main reason why I'm doing this is because of the vulnerability of VoIP as we move from the PSTN to VoIP. We're going to be increasingly vulnerable to organized crime. Back in the 90s when I worked on PGP, the principal motivation for doing that as a human rights issue was that governments had to, I wanted to try to make it more difficult for governments to monitor our communications. Today, it seems that the threat model has shifted. Now, because of the enormous effect that organized crime now has on the internet. I mean, I've got my server here connected to the internet, and I'm watching on the security screen these attacks going by as the security log is displaying all these attacks, and it's sort of like it goes on day and night. It's sort of like being inside an armored personnel carrier and listening to bullets hit the outside while you're safely inside, and you hope that you have good armor. That's what kind of a hostile environment we're operating in. So, of course, I am concerned about excessive government surveillance. I'm never going to stop worrying about that. But it's more than that. It's also organized crime. We need protection from organized crime. And we're not going to be able to safely move to VoIP unless we come up with a way to protect ourselves during the migration of our phone calls to VoIP. And so we have to encrypt it. We have no choice. And I think that my protocol does it better than any other. The other protocols, the other two protocols, one of them is actually is used quite a bit, is the one I described at the beginning of this talk, SDS. But it's just the absolute worst way to do it. It's embarrassingly bad. The other way is something called DTLS SRTP. But that way is something that requires a public key infrastructure. And public key infrastructures are complicated and bureaucratic and difficult to maintain. And it's going to take a long time to build them and make them work. And so I think DTLS is not the right approach. Anything that relies on a public key infrastructure is not the right approach. If you look at what happened during the 1990s, a lot of companies went out of business trying to build PKI. PKI can work if you have like for web servers to have certificates, and then web browsers can check it and they connect to the web server. That's okay. You can make that work. That's a one-to-many topology. But when you have a many-to-many topology like email, during the 1990s, people were trying to build email based on public key infrastructure, and it failed. It failed miserably. This is why PGP has been so successful, because it doesn't require that. In fact, SMIME, which requires a PKI, or typically requires a PKI, has failed despite the fact that it enjoys a tremendous advantage in that it's bundled with Microsoft products. No one uses it, though, because it requires a PKI. Whereas PGP, which is not bundled, and you have to go out and get it, is far more widely used than SMIME, because it does not require a centrally managed PKI. And I think that the reasons for, not why a PKI is inappropriate for email it's even less appropriate for phone calls. Phone calls we should be moving to something, lighter and more ephemeral, because that's what phone calls are. And so we should be moving further and further away from PKI, not closer and closer. And that's what DTLS is doing, trying to get it closer to a PKI, trying to make it work with a PKI. My protocol doesn't require a PKI, and so I think it's the best protocol you can find for VoIP encryption. More questions? Turn the microphone back on. Yeah. Well, that's a good question. For conference calls, the way typically conference calls are done is that it's a star topology. That is, there's a central conference mixer that everyone's connected to. So each of those connections will be a ZRTP connection, and the audio mixing is done inside the conference mixer. So each one will have a separate session key. Now either you could do the comparison with the conference mixer by comparing the short authentication string with whoever's running the conference, or you could rely on the key continuity characteristics, which we've talked about, because maybe you've used the same conference mixer in the past. Or there's one other thing that I have not talked about yet, and that is that later on, the IETF plans to add some new features to SIP to provide end-to-end integrity protection for SIP. That means that SDP attributes will be able to be transmitted through SIP end-to-end without any modification. Now, it's actually pretty hard to make that work. In fact, there are no SIP stacks that have that right now. But they claim that they're going to do that. And so if they are right, if they do manage to transmit SDP attributes through SIP with end-to-end integrity protection, then my protocol has a way to leverage that to create end-to-end integrity protection